Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
Thanks for joining us on another Sunday night video. Today we're going to be talking about how to choose a travel company, a recruiter, what questions to ask, those kind of things. That's probably one of the most common things we get asked by current and prospective travelers. How do you choose which company is best for you? What questions do you ask recruiters? What do you want to know about the company before you start working with them? All those things are very difficult starting out. So we want to talk about that and hopefully help you guys out.
Yep, absolutely. So we got Jared and Whitney here from Travel Therapy Mentor coming to you live tonight. We'll give a few people a chance to log on and join us tonight. If you are hopping on, please just say hey below, leave us a comment and let us know who you are. Jared's gonna get this video shared in a few groups so we can have more people join in with our conversation. So just to give a brief intro for anybody who might be new to our page, my name is Whitney Aiken and this is Jared Kazaza. We are the faces behind the Travel Therapy Mentor site. We are both doctors of physical therapy and we have been working as traveling therapists for almost 4 years. We started right away as new grads, so I know there's a lot of you guys, a lot of the GPT students, as well as other disciplines, OTs, speech therapists, PTAs and CODAs that are getting ready to graduate soon that might be thinking about getting into travel. So you can definitely do it as a new grad. We did. We've been traveling ever since 2015 and we haven't stopped since. So it's been a great experience. So on our Travel Therapy Mentor site, we're doing these weekly videos just to give you guys some more information about getting started with travel therapy and kind of some of the ins and outs. So tonight we wanted to talk about that hot topic of how do I find the right travel company and the right recruiter to work with, because that's really how you get started on your travel therapy career, and it's important to know that. So I see a few new people are signing in. Hey Jeff, hey Lauren, hey Ryan, hi Susan. Thank you for joining on tonight. If you guys would just leave us a comment and let us know who you are and why you're here. And I am breaking our tripod. Sorry guys. Let me get that fixed for us here.
Have you guys been watching the NCAA tournament? It's been really awesome this weekend.
Yeah, lots of fun games, and I'm not even a huge basketball person, but lots of not upsets, but a couple upsets.
Close games.
A lot of close games. We got Susan here. Hey, thanks for what you do. I realize that my recruiter is taking advantage of me. So phony. Oh, Susan, that's so hard to hear. Unfortunately, we hear it a lot. Sometimes people feel like their recruiter is taking advantage of them and they're being shady. So thank you for joining us tonight. Maybe we can give you a little bit of insight on what we look for in recruiters and companies so that you can try to avoid that situation in the future. Hi Ryan, hi Jeff, hi Lauren. Thanks for tuning in. Jeff says he's sad to see Duke lose today. Jared too.
Yeah, I had them win in the tournament, so that was crazy.
Ryan is being silly as usual and being our promoter. Ryan wants to know, do you guys have a website that has information for physical therapy and financial freedom? Yes. So our travel therapy site is Travel Therapy Mentor. We also have a personal blog that's called fifthwheelpt.com, and that's where we talk about our travels and what we do, and then a lot of financial info as well, because Jared is working towards early retirement, financial independence. So there's a lot of posts on there about finance if you guys are interested in that at all. So we're gonna get started here on talking about tonight's topic. If anybody else joins on, just feel free to say hey, leave us a comment below and let us know what it is that you want to know about traveling therapy, or what it is that you want to know specifically about companies and recruiters. So there's a ton of companies out there. People always say, you know, what's the best company? Which company should I work with?
Yeah, that's a very common question, and the answer is always there's no best company. It all just depends on you, it depends on your personality, it depends on the recruiter. So we've had plenty of companies that have been recommended to us, plenty of recruiters that have been recommended to us that we end up talking to and didn't like, and we've also had people that we love that we recommend to other people and they don't like them. So there's no one perfect recruiter and for everyone, and there's no one perfect company for everyone. It depends on a lot of different factors.
Yeah, there's so many things to consider, and there's just so many companies out there. I mean, there's probably over 100 travel therapy, travel nursing companies out there, and they all have different perks. So a lot of them, if you're a certain discipline, if you're a PT, an OT, a speech language pathologist, an assistant, a lot of these companies are going to have similar jobs and similar qualities. So it's more of just a matter of finding the right company that works for you and the right recruiter that works for you. So we want to talk about some of the things that we look for in a specific company, and the qualities of the ones that we work with that we like. And that's the reason why we continue to work with them, or continue to have people that ask us for recommendations. We send them to them. So just a few things to think about as far as a company goes, and then we're going to talk about some qualities as far as our recruiter goes. So as far as companies and finding companies, a big question that people have is like, well, how do I find travel companies? Well, there's always Google. You can always just search around and find some companies, but you also have to consider that some of the bigger name ones are going to be the ones that come up first. So it's just more, whoever paid more ad money to come up first, you know, it's going to get those higher search engine results, or just whoever happens to be more well-known. But just because they're more well-known doesn't mean they're always the best. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. So you can search, you can also look at reviews.
Yeah, you can use things like Glassdoor. Some different company or different websites will have like reviews of different companies that you can search for, and that's like, you know, any company's on there, but the travel companies are on there as well. But yeah, like Whitney was saying, so the biggest companies have the most money to spend, so they can spend a lot of money on advertising, which means that you'll always find those big companies when you Google things, or you might see them targeting you in Facebook ads. So on your timeline, you might see an ad for a company. That doesn't mean that company's great. It just means they have a lot of money to spend on ads.
Oh, or another one is last week we went to the student conclave in North Carolina, and there was one company that all these students had heard of, and that the reason that they had heard of it was not necessarily that it was the best company, but because they were marketing and targeting students. So they just happened to only know about the one company that was really targeting students and marketing to them, and coming to talks and that sort of thing, and Facebook ads and that kind of stuff.
And it's a company that we do not use and we do not recommend anyone, and that's the one that every student knows about. So,
right. So
I won't mention any names, but
yeah. So anyway, there's just a lot of factors to look into. So what we usually recommend, and what everyone we know in the travel world recommends, is go off recommendations from your friends, from people, from travelers, from therapists or nurses that you've talked to that have had good experiences. Because even if you Google that company A is great, if you just cold call them, just call them up or just fill out the thing on their website, you're just going to get put with any random recruiter, probably the newest one at the company, because they're trying to look to build their caseload. So you may just get stuck with whoever. So even if that company came recommended, if you don't communicate with the recruiter that your friend or somebody likes, then you might get stuck with some recruiter that isn't good.
yeah, it's luck of the draw in that case. What you have to remember is the recruiters that have a lot of travelers that refer people to them, the really good recruiters usually already have a full caseload. They already have a ton of travelers. So you're not going to be calling into a company or emailing a company and getting matched with that person. You're getting matched with someone that doesn't have a lot of people. And that could be, you know, they're not very good, or it could just mean they're new and they're building up their their travelers. So you never know. It's just luck of the draw. You could get matched with someone great, or you could get someone not so great. So we always recommend go off of recommendations from a current traveler, because at least you know in that situation that at least one person has had a good experience with them. Whereas if you just contact the company directly, it's just random.
Yeah. So I always tell people, avoid going online when you're first trying to look into travel therapy. Public service announcement. Don't go online and just put your name and your email address in. You're going to get bombarded with phone calls. You're going to get bombarded with emails. You may or may not get with a good recruiter. They're all going to try to sell you on whatever their top qualities are. And maybe it is a great company and maybe it is a great recruiter, but you just don't know unless you, one, ask some other travelers, or two, work yourself with a couple others to compare and contrast. So another huge mistake you can make as an early traveler is just working with one company, because you're like, well, this person sounds great. You know, they have some jobs that I'm interested in and their benefits sound cool, so I'll just work with this one company, and then you might just end up staying with that one company forever. And if you never compared and contrasted with other companies, you don't know if there's other benefits you're missing out on. You don't know if there's other pay you're missing out on, that sort of thing. So
yeah, we've seen that happen a lot, where somebody finds a company they really like, they mesh well with the recruiter, and they're like, they don't, you know, so say they're not involved at all in the online community of travelers, so they don't know any better. They find one company, they work with that recruiter, it goes great for them. And that might be perfect. It might be that they were getting the very highest pay they could have gotten, or it could just be that they were getting high pay in comparison to a permanent job, but they're actually getting a really low pay in the travel world, and they would never know because you have nothing to compare it to. So that's why we always recommend working with more than one company. Well, it's for a few different reasons.
Yeah, so, and by the way, when we say working with, if you're new to this whole world, you're tuning in and you don't know what we're talking about, when we say working with, we just mean talking to. So just having a communication with, emailing or phone calling with a couple different recruiters so that you can know what they're all about and then have them present different jobs to you. But yeah, like Jared said, there's a few different reasons for working with multiple companies. The biggest one I would say is job availability, especially as a pair, but even as a solo traveler. They're going to have some different jobs, so you want to have that option to have different jobs presented to you, so you're not limiting your pool of options. The other thing is, again, comparing and contrasting how their pay packages work. So, you know, company A might present you with an $1,800 pay package, but you don't really know, okay, are they breaking it up per the guidelines? Like, how am I maximizing my income? They might just say, this is your hourly, this is your stipend, boom, done. Well, if you don't have a second company to compare that with, you don't know if that's good or bad, or if that's how you want it to be for your tax purposes. So it's good to just compare how different companies do things.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other thing as far as like working with different ones?
Another reason to work with two, hopefully if you get matched with a good recruiter, or you talk to someone and they recommend you a good recruiter, you won't have to worry about this. But if you're working with just one recruiter, like we were talking about, you don't have anything to compare to, right? And so we see that a lot where people, they don't know if they're getting high pay or not. And also, if you're working with more than one company, it gives the recruiter an incentive to give you higher pay, because if they don't, and then you get an offer that's better from a different company, then they don't get any money from you. And they spent their time, like, you know, having you fill out paperwork or whatever, and they just wasted their time. So there's a lot less chance that they're going to lowball you if they know that you're working with more than one company.
Yeah. And we always tell people, because a lot of people ask us, like, you know, is that okay to work with multiple companies? Is this recruiter going to be mad at me? Should I tell them or should I not tell them? And we always let you know that if they act weird about it, then they're probably not a good recruiter, because good recruiters will understand that for the best move for you, for your career, for your business side of things, is to work with multiple recruiters, and they will understand that. As long as you're being honest and transparent, to an extent, you're not trying to pit them against each other or that sort of thing. You're not being shady. You're just being honest and saying, oh, well, this recruiter has presented me with another job in this area. And you don't have to tell them exactly, you know, everything about it, but you do just want to be open and honest that you are working with multiple from the get-go, so they know that. And yeah, hopefully they're not going to try to lowball you or tell you things that are untrue.
Yeah, and that goes along with what Whitney was saying about job availability in different areas. So a couple of companies that we work with are really small, so you never see ads for these companies because they don't have a big marketing budget. But they have some contracts in areas that people want to go to that these other big companies don't have, and it's because they've made direct contacts with that maybe the regional manager or something like that. So they've actually reached out and been like, hey, we're a small company, we can take lower pay from you and still be able to pay out higher because we have lower overhead. We can take better care of you and be more approachable than these big companies.
Yeah.
So if you don't work with more than one company, you'll miss out on some jobs.
You just don't know what else is out there.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into talking about just some specific things that we look for in companies and how you can compare and contrast them. I see we have a couple comments coming through. Jeff says, I don't always take recommendations for recruiters, but when I do, I listen to Whitney and Jared. Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate your support. So anybody that's listening, if you do want our recommendations for who we've had success working with in our 4 years, please feel free to send us a message after this, or if you want to comment below and just say #company, we'll send you which companies that we like. And if you can give us some information on what you're looking for, we're going to get into that, but each company is going to be different for different people. So we like to know, when we hear from you guys, what it is that you value in a company. You know, are you looking for mentorship? Are you looking for certain areas?
Are you looking for highest pay? Are you looking for certain settings? Like, there's so many different things that go into that. So when someone contacts us, we want some information about you and what you're looking for to be able to match you up with who we think might be a good fit.
Yep. So if you want any of that information, just comment below #company. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of some of the things that you could look for in a company. So the first thing I would look at in comparing companies is the benefits, okay? You want to ask them what their benefits package includes. Sometimes they'll just send you like a PDF of their benefits package. Maybe they have like a quick summary so that you can understand it better, because let's just be honest, like if you read this whole benefits package, like this whole PDF, you're like, I don't know anything about this. But maybe they have the highlights section. So a highlight section for me would be, okay, 401k would be one thing that I want to look at. So do they offer 401k? Some companies do, some companies don't. If they don't, maybe they're able to make up for that in some other way in their benefits package. They might offer something different. So it's not a deal breaker, but if you are someone who knows that you want to invest, then you want to make sure that your company is going to have a 401k.
Yeah, and there's some people that don't care about that at all. Like, you could just open your own IRA, say you're not putting more than $5,000 or so a year in retirement accounts, then maybe the 401k doesn't matter to you at all. So, so that's one of the things that we try to match people up with, because it's that's a benefit that we value, but some people don't care at all.
Now, if you are somebody who cares about investing, you're going to want to get into the finer print of that 401k. When can I start contributing? Okay, if you only plan on working with this company for 1 or 2 contracts, sometimes you can't start contributing right away. So it might be important for you that you want a company that you can start contributing on the first contract or on the first day. If you can't, maybe it's, after you've worked one contract, or after you've worked 1,000 hours, or after you've worked 6 months. So ask them, when can I start contributing? The other question is, do they match? And if they match, when does that start? And the third thing is, if they match, when are you fully vested in their match? So explain a little bit about what vesting is.
So vesting just means that you get to keep the match that they give you. So some companies will say that they have a match of, say, 3%, but you're not vested in that match until 3 years, which means that if you don't work with that company for 3 years, then you don't keep any of the match. So it's basically like, the match was pointless for you.
It was all just smoke and mirrors, because they're saying, well, we match, but it doesn't really matter because you're not planning on traveling for more than 2 years, or you're not planning on staying with the same company for every job. So,
yeah, and the companies that have the long vesting period, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something for you to consider in the totality of choosing a company and recruiter.
And it might just encourage you to say, okay, if this match and this 401k is something that's really important to me, maybe it's going to sway me more to stay with this one company that also meets all the other check boxes. So like for us, we had one company that we really liked. They had a lot of the jobs we wanted. They also had 401k. They also had a 3-year vesting tier. So we tried to go out of our way to take the majority of our first 3 years of contracts with that company so we could qualify for the vesting or the matching. So that was something that was important to us, but it might not be important to you. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, and real quick on that. This is a long tangent we can go on in this, but the vesting period depends. Sometimes it'll be like a cliff, which means if you don't work the 3 years, you get nothing. Sometimes it'll be like a tiered thing, where say like the first year you get 33% of what they match. Second year you get 66%, and then if you work 3 years, you get the full amount. So every company's different, but that's something to look into for sure.
Right. Okay, so that's one thing on the benefits package you might compare and contrast between companies, 401k and the matching. The other thing might be insurance. Okay, so you might want to ask them, do they offer insurance? Pretty much all of them, I think, offer insurance. When does it start? Does it start on day 1 of my contract, day 30 of my contract? We know one company, it starts on the 1st of the month, regardless of when you start your contract. So that's important for you to know. When are my benefits going to kick in, my insurance, my health benefits? Going to kick in, especially if you're someone who has medical problems or you have a prescription that you need filled, that sort of thing. That's going to be really important for you to know, when do the benefits or the insurance kick in.
Yeah.
And then also about carrying over between contracts. So some of them, the insurance will carry over between contracts as long as you take your next contract with them and you don't take more than 2 to 4 weeks off. So you need to know that information so you can plan ahead. And then if you shop to a bunch of companies and compare them all and find out, gosh, I don't really know, this makes me feel uneasy about having this insurance starts on day 1, this one doesn't. Maybe you want to end up getting the insurance on your own, but the more information you have, the better off you are.
Yep.
I see a few new people are signing on. Hi Dee, thanks for joining in with us tonight. If anybody else is joining on, just say hello below and let us know who you are. If you're a student, if you're a current traveler, if you're a current therapist that's looking into traveling, we'd love to know who's tuning in. And then like we had mentioned before, a few people had commented #company. That's if you want to hear about which companies and which recruiters we recommend, you can comment #company.
Yeah, and we'll send you a message after this and ask for more information about like what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Are you looking for certain settings, certain location, all those things.
Yeah. Yeah, so some more things that you might compare and contrast as far as the companies go. 401k, we talked about insurance and when it starts. And does it cover between contracts? There's some other benefits, like do they offer PTO? Most companies don't. That's not a big thing in the travel world to offer PTO, but there is one company we work with that if you work a certain number of hours on a contract, you'll accrue like a full day, like an 8 hours of PTO, which could be a cool perk. Like maybe during your 13-week contract, you want to accrue 1 day of PTO so you can go get all your medical appointments taken care of that day, or take a 3-day weekend on your contract or that sort of thing. So if that's important to you, you might ask the companies about if they offer that.
Yep.
And then there's some other miscellaneous benefits like life insurance, disability insurance. One company we work with offers a free trip.
CEU reimbursement.
Oh, yes, CEU reimbursement. I kind of have that in a different spot. So there's a few things as far as like benefits to talk about and what the company provides. So you want to compare and contrast the benefits packages of your companies. Okay, so Jared sort of alluded to this earlier. The next thing I have to talk about is whether it's a small or a large company.
Yeah, and this is something that we see come up a ton with current travelers, prospective travelers. So yeah, the large companies have more money to spend on ads and things like that, but that means that they have higher overhead, which means that they probably don't pay as well. But it also means that they probably have more jobs. Yep. So basically the pros, I would say, of a big company is that they usually have the most jobs. They usually have pretty good benefits. I'd say those are the two big pros, right?
Yeah, so this is kind of like, how do you figure this out? How do you figure out if they're a small or large company? One, you could ask, you could ask the person who refers you to them, like, oh, is this a bigger company? Is this a smaller company? You could ask in your introductory email or introductory phone call with your recruiter, hey, tell me some things that are different about your company, something that stands out about your company. And some of them might say, well, we're a smaller or a small to medium-sized company, so that means that we're going to have lower overhead, like Jared said. Our company costs, we don't have a huge staff, we don't have a huge building, we don't have a huge marketing budget. Our company costs are going to be lower, so we can afford to pay a little bit more to our travelers. That might be really important to you.
Yeah, and that's the biggest pro of a small company is they pay more money usually. They have lower overhead, they're able to pay more. And then medium-sized companies are kind of in between the two. So a lot of people only prefer to work with small companies because they make the most. And that's great, but you have to realize that you're giving up some things there. Benefits probably aren't as good, and probably don't have as many jobs available.
Yeah.
Some people only work with the big companies, but you have to realize you're probably not going to get the highest pay with the big company. So there's pros and cons to everything, and that's why it's impossible to say like one company's the best or one recruiter's the best or anything like
Right.
that.
So the big companies, the reason Jared's saying they might have more jobs is there's like one big company, especially it's the largest one, and they tend to have the most jobs across the whole U.S. And so they're a good one to work with if you're interested in having a variety of options, especially if you're a pair and you're like, well, we always need to have 2 jobs in the same place. Well, maybe the small company doesn't have as many jobs across the whole U.S., but maybe the bigger company does. However, maybe the small company has like a niche area. Maybe they have like we work with one that just works in the East Coast, and they have a lot of jobs right in the East Coast because they're based near DC. So they are going to have more jobs in that area than the bigger company, but maybe the bigger company is going to have more jobs across the whole U.S.
Yep.
So you just need to think about some of these things on whether it's a small, medium, or large company.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, kind of the next thing I had was just about jobs and where they are. You might ask the recruiter in your introductory email with them, hey, where do you tend to see the most jobs? And maybe they'll say right now, or I tend to see across the board, like Washington's pretty hot for us, Texas is pretty hot, California, and New York. Or maybe like that other company, they'll say most of our jobs are in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, but we do have jobs in California and Florida as well.
Yeah.
So ask the recruiter, where do they tend to see the most jobs? And maybe these big companies are going to say everywhere, all 50 states. And
we've also seen that some of the smaller companies will specialize in like one area. So one of the companies we work with has a lot of outpatient jobs that other companies don't have. Some of the other smaller companies will specialize more with like schools. They'll have a lot of school jobs that other companies don't have. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah. Something else you might want to consider is who does your recruiter, or who does the company work with? Do they only work with therapists? Do they work with nurses as well? Do they work with radiology and imaging departments and lab techs as well? This may or may not matter to you, but I like to know kind of who my recruiter specializes in working with. Typically, they'll kind of focus on like what they call allied health. Some of them do both. Some of them do nursing and allied. So you might want to know that. And then especially if you're a pair and your partner, your friend, or your spouse that's traveling with you, say the other one's a nurse, you might want to know if that company also has nursing or if they only do therapy.
Yeah, usually the recruiters won't go between the two, but it can sometimes be nice to just be working with the same company as a PT and a nurse or whatever. You might have to work with different recruiters, but it might be through the same company. But
yeah, so that might be something you ask them is who do they work with. Another thing that you might want to ask about the company is what type of pay are they typically seeing? Ask your recruiter, ask the company representative, what's a typical pay package look like for you? What's a typical weekly pay that you're seeing across the U.S.? Or if you're only looking in one state or one area, what's a typical weekly pay that you see in this area for my discipline? So you might want to know that going in.
Yeah, and ask things like what's the highest you see? What's the lowest you've seen over the last month? That kind of stuff. And if those numbers are way out of the range of like what we talk about or what some of the other travel therapists out there that give information, what they talk about, then you might be skeptical of that company.
Yeah. Typically we see an average between about 1,500 to 1,700 across the U.S. I have heard people, and this is for PTs, OTs, and speech therapists.
Mostly on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. And then, so if you are seeing numbers more in like the 14s and the 13s, then you might be skeptical of that company. Now for assistants, this is going to be a little different. Your numbers might typically be average more in like the 13s and the 14s. Now, some bigger, higher cost of living areas, you should be seeing closer to 18, 19, 2,000 plus. So if your company is saying, oh, we're going to put you in, the San Francisco Bay Area and the pay package is $1,800, then you need to be skeptical of like why. This should be easily closer to $19,000-$2,000 for that area.
And when we're talking about these numbers, these are after-tax numbers. So this is like net pay, take-home pay. But yeah, so we never recommend taking a job, even as a new grad, a PT, OT, SLP, less than $1,500 a week. That's like the bottom.
Right.
Even 4 years ago, we were getting jobs for more than that as new grads. So that should definitely be the low end. If you have a company that's saying that, you know, they're sending you offers for less than that, then probably should try to find a different company.
Yeah. Now, this is getting a little bit more into the finer print, but as you grow and learn more into the travel therapy world and actually start to understand how the pay works and how it's broken down, you may be curious to ask this recruiter or this company, how do you break down your pay packages? What do you typically do? Like a question that you might ask would be, what do you typically do for your hourly? So a lot of therapists and a lot of recruiters, a lot of people in the travel therapy world will recommend that in general for a PT and OT or speech therapist that you don't go below $20 an hour. There's no hard and fast rule about this, but there are some people that say that it might be bad to go below $20 an hour. So if that's something that you feel passionate about and you feel like I don't want to be risky at all and I don't want to go below 20, then maybe this recruiter that's telling you, yeah, 2,000 plus, but the hourly is 14. If you're not comfortable with that, you need to speak up about it. Now, there are therapists that are comfortable with that and it's okay and they've worked out the numbers and they think it's fine.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the lower the taxable pay is, the more they're able to pay you in total in net pay, right? Because you pay less taxes on the taxable pay and they pay less taxes on your behalf on the taxable pay.
Right.
So the farther they can drop that number, the higher the pay package is going to look. So you have to be careful when comparing two different companies, because what if one tells you you can make $1,700 a week at this job, but the taxable pay is only $15 an hour, versus another company says you make $1,600 a week at that same job, but the taxable pay is $20. That might be pretty comparable. So you just have to consider that.
Yeah, so that's something that once you get down the line and learning more about travel therapy pay, you might want to consider comparing, but in the beginning stages, it's not that important. And as far as comfort level with taking these lower taxable hourly rate wages, you really need to talk to a tax professional to understand the ins and outs of it, to know whether you should be comfortable or you should be concerned.
Yeah, or at least do your research on the IRS guidelines. When I started, that's what I did. I went to the guidelines for these questions, and I read up and tried to find where I was comfortable, what I could justify, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a great resource to learn more information about that type of stuff is called traveltax.com. What's his last name?
Smith.
Joseph Smith at traveltax.com if you want to learn more about the fine print of how pay is broken down.
The frequently asked questions section on his site is really good. I learned a lot there, and that was several years ago when I was learning there.
Yep. So we see a few comments coming through. We'll answer them in just a couple minutes.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions about anything we're talking about, or you want us to clarify anything, please ask, because I realize that sometimes we don't realize like what level we're speaking to or who exactly the audience is, because we were at a conference last week and we were talking to some students, and everything that we said we had to like go back a few steps so that they understood what we were talking about, because normally we're talking to other therapists that understand like gross pay, net pay, all that
right
stuff.
And a lot of this stuff I have written down as far as like I'm doing like a checklist. Like I would ask these things to a company, I would ask these things to a recruiter. I actually have that written out in an article, so after the video is over I will put the link to that article in there so you guys can kind of go back and review kind of like the show notes of like what we're talking about today, just so you can say, okay, I'll have this article in front of me next time I talk to a company and try to check off some of these boxes of what to talk to them about. Because that's kind of how I do it when I have a phone conversation with a new recruiter, because we're getting to know new recruiters all the time. We don't work with the same ones now that we worked with 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So when I
Or
had my
even
first
2 years ago. Or...
when I have my initial phone call with a recruiter to learn more about them, or an email, I kind of go through this checklist that I have of things that I want to know about, so I can compare them with my other companies and find out, okay, are you a company I want to work with? Okay, so a couple more things that you might want to ask a company. You might want to ask if they do any kind of reimbursements in addition to their pay packages. So this is something else where you have to be careful about comparing one recruiter or one company to the other company. You might have a pay package that's just, this recruiter is going to pay you $1,900 out the gate, and that just includes your hourly and your stipend, but they're not doing any reimbursements on top of that. They don't do that. Whereas this other company might say, I'm going to pay you $1,700 a week, but I'm also going to give you a reimbursement for this, this, and this.
Yeah, it might be like beginning travel to the location. So sometimes they'll pay you mileage to get to the travel location. It might be ending travel, so coming back home. And sometimes that can be significant. It can be like $300 or $400 that you get each way. And then you might get reimbursement for a CEU that you have planned during the course of your contract. You might get reimbursement for a license, and that can include everything involved with that license, like getting the other states to verify that your license is in good standing with them, the application fee, requesting your transcripts from your school, like all those things involve fees, and some companies will reimburse for all that.
Yeah. So you need to add that into your consideration of, does this company like to package things in just an hourly and a stipend, or do they like to package thing an hourly stipend plus reimbursements? Because that's going to make a difference. And it's really all the same money across the board. It just depends on how you'd prefer to have it divided up. And when you're comparing company A and company B, you need to take into consideration these reimbursements. That's something we didn't really understand in the beginning, because we were working with company A that was paying us roughly $1,500 to $1,600 a week, but they were reimbursing for our license, our beginning, our ending travel, and providing CEU assistance throughout the contract. And then company B came around and said, oh yeah, we'll pay you $1,700. That's great. And we thought, oh my gosh, that's so much more. But then come to find out, they didn't do any license reimbursement, any travel reimbursement, or any CEU assistance. So it kind of was about even, but we were super excited, oh, let's go over here, this is better. Yeah. And we didn't realize that it was pretty much the same.
And that's basically what we talked about in that intangible benefits article or video. I think that was like 2 weeks ago. But yeah, you have to take into account everything that the company offers, and we've learned that more and more as we go along.
Yep. One more thing on CEU. So some of them, instead of making it a CEU reimbursement, will actually just provide you access to some type of online account that you can complete online CEUs during your contract. So that's kind of a cool perk, because it's not really a dollar value, but it's just something else that they do for all their employees, because they'll have like a group rate on one of the ones we work with does it's called HomeCEUConnection.com. So those may or may not be the highest quality CEUs, but you can get a few here and there, and that's just a group rate they have for that website across the whole company. So it is accounted for in their overhead, but it doesn't come out of your money for that pay package on that job. Another one we work with offers a MedBridge access, which is super cool because MedBridge is awesome. MedBridge has really high quality CEUs, so they offer, while you're on contract, unlimited CEUs on MedBridge, and they have a group rate for that. So again, it doesn't come out of that pay package, but it's an extra perk.
Yeah. Speaking of MedBridge, if you guys are interested at all, we have a discount code for MedBridge. It's Fifth Wheel PT. So that's the $200 rate if anyone's interested in MedBridge. We really enjoy it.
And that's kind of outside of talking about companies, but if you guys do, we do like MedBridge on our own. That's what we use to get CEUs when we're on the road. So if you guys want to sign up for MedBridge, you can go to medbridgeeducation.com and use the code Fifth Wheel PT to get a discount on your annual membership, and then you would already have your CEUs covered for the year on MedBridge, and you wouldn't have to worry about that added perk with some companies. So if that's something that's important to you, you can check that out. Okay, we got just a couple other things on the company side we want to talk about, and then we'll take a couple questions and comments. Another thing,
the 40-hour guarantee. So this is one of those things that we took for granted in the beginning. So the first company we worked with them for maybe it was over a year of nonstop contracts with them, and they had a 40-hour guarantee that included any missed hours. If we didn't ask for the time off, then we got paid 40 hours no matter what. And there were some situations where like around Christmas time or New Year's or whatever, that I would only work 32 hours, but I'd still get paid for 40. And I took that for granted. So then we moved to this other company that we were talking about. We get paid an extra $100 a week. We're all excited about that. But they have a 40-hour guarantee that doesn't include things like holidays or snow days or anything like that. So what you have to remember there is, if there's a holiday during your contract and you're working an outpatient, the clinic is closed, which means that you only get paid for 32 hours that week. So, that can be, in some cases that can be $400 less you make that week, which can be significant.
Yeah, it's huge. So that's something else you might want to ask a company is, do you guys offer 40-hour guarantees on your contract? And sometimes they might say it just depends on the facility, but we can always ask. So you just want to ask that when you're starting to look at jobs, like, does this job offer a 40-hour guarantee, or do you as a company offer a 40-hour guarantee?
Yeah.
Just find out.
And if you do, what does that cover? Does that cover just low census, or does that cover any time that I can't go to work? So for snow days or, if the clinic's closed for any reason.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to talk about on the company side, some questions to ask different travel companies, is where do their jobs come from? So some of these bigger companies that have bought out certain facilities and certain management systems and things, they'll have a lot of what are called exclusive contracts, where they get first dibs on a contract before some other companies get dibs on it. That's huge for you as a traveler, because you're like, wow, I'm gonna get first dibs on this contract before any of those other companies are. So if I'm really on top of it, I might get that dream job. Some of them also, even on the other end of things, like we said, we have like a smaller company we work with that they have made connections in their local area. So they might have first dibs on those jobs because they have exclusive contracts with those companies. Whereas the main pot of jobs come from what are called VMSs, or vendor management systems. So a vendor management system is where all these hospitals will just go, it's like the Craigslist of jobs or something. They just all go and advertise their jobs on this list, and all the companies have access to the VMS.
They pay like, I'm not sure if it's like a monthly amount they pay, but they pay money to have access to this huge list of jobs that they can advertise to all their travelers.
So if a new job opens in Orlando, Florida, that's a SNF, and it's on the VMS, and you're looking for that Orlando job, all 5 of your recruiters at the same time are going to email you and go, oh, just got a SNF in Orlando.
Yeah. And it'll usually be about an hour apart, and you can tell which recruiters are more on top of it, because you get a message right away, and then an hour later,
So VMS jobs are not going to differentiate company A from company B. All recruiters have those jobs across the board. So you might want to get a feel for, this is a question that I've started to, as I've learned more, ask my recruiters and ask my companies, what percentage of your jobs come from VMSs? Because if I'm looking to add a third or a fourth company to get something different, and they're saying 90% of our jobs come from the VMS, they're not really going to offer you that much different from the company 1, 2, and 3 that you already have.
Yeah.
Whereas if a lot of them, if your company that you're starting to talk to say, no, we have quite a few jobs that are exclusive contracts, or that we have gone out of our way to make connections with that are a little bit different than other companies, then that's huge.
Yep.
That's something you might want to know about. And the other thing is cold calling. I usually ask recruiters, if I'm really looking for a certain job in a certain area, are you willing to just get on the phone and do cold calling? Which I had somebody ask me recently, what does cold calling mean? And it just means they were going to pick up the phone and call all the facilities in that area for you and say, hey, I have somebody looking for a job. Are you guys hiring? That sort of thing. And sometimes
that's a lot of work, though.
Yeah.
So if just because someone's not willing to do that does not mean they're a bad recruiter by any means.
It just means, you kind of want to get a feel for whether they're going to really go out of their way to look for it.
They're going the extra mile for sure.
Yeah. So those are a few things that I wanted to talk about as far as what to look for in a company, in a travel company. We're going to next talk about what to look for, the qualities to look for, and the questions to ask a recruiter. Let's go through a few comments. If you guys have questions about what we've talked about so far, please just comment below, and we'll read through the comments here.
Connor is a student. What year are you, Connor?
Thanks for joining in. And what discipline?
Yep. Ryan says CU reimbursement's great. Yes, It is great. Jenny is a PTA with big dreams to travel.
Welcome, awesome. Jenny, and we will send you some recommendations after this. Thank you for commenting #company for recommendations. David, hey David, good to see you again. He's tuned in with us before. David wants to know, do the large companies usually have better benefits though? Because then the smaller companies aren't paying more in a sense with that factored in, right? Looking at cash versus benefits.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of what we're talking about there. A lot of times you have to factor that into a pay package. So yeah, they might pay you $100 more, but say their health insurance isn't as good, their dental is more expensive, like they don't have 401k matching, like factor all that in.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, sometimes there's cases where you might make an extra $50 a week with a smaller company, but you don't get nearly as good of benefits. So yeah.
And benefits meaning, like we talked about, benefits can cover a host of different things: 401k, insurance, PTO, CU reimbursement, all that stuff. But specifically talking about insurance, if you're young and healthy and you don't care, you're probably just going to want, especially if you're a new grad, you're a student, you're like, whatever, I just need insurance just to cover preventative stuff. I just need my annual exam once a year and my teeth cleaned, whatever. You're not going to care whether the insurance has a huge deductible or it's with a company that's not as good. Yeah. Whereas if you really know the medical system, you have medical problems, you're going to care more about whether the insurance is really good insurance. Is it Blue Cross Blue Shield? Are they going to have a lower deductible available for you? Do you have a family? Do they have a good family plan?
Yeah, what's the cost for the family plan?
What's the cost for the family plan? What's going to come out of your check weekly to pay for the plan? So yes, you might want to get more in the nitty gritty of that when comparing the companies and the benefits. But like I said, for most people, if you're a new grad, if you're single, or married but don't have any medical problems, you might just care more about the high pay. So it's all in factoring in what's important to you.
And we're generalizing here because I definitely know of one small company in particular that has really great benefits, probably better than some of the bigger companies. So you just have to to take it on a case-by-case basis.
And you just have to ask. Okay, Ryan wants to know, do you think there will be a significant increase for PTs in the next few years because of baby boomers? And then the rest of the question was nonsense. There is a significant increased need for PT.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm going to say about the rest of that.
It's going to keep getting more and more.
Especially, and Ryan, I know you're trying to be silly, but a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen with PTs, OTs, speech therapists, and assistants in the coming Medicare changes. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. But I think travel therapy is around to stay. So I think you don't have too much to worry about. Okay. Dee wants to know, are you two willing to set up a consult with newbies to review pay packages and make sure you're not getting taken advantage of?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
We get quite a few emails and messages from people, not even just new travelers, but even established travelers that have been traveling for a couple of years with the same company, and they're like, I don't know, is this good pay, or could I be making more with a different company? Should I switch? I really like my recruiter. So yeah, we get questions like that all the time. So if you want to send us a pay package, we'll definitely check it out for you.
So if you want us to look over a pay package, just the way it's broken down, like as far as the hourly, the stipend, what other things are factored in, we would be happy to look over it for you. You can send us a message on our Facebook page, or you can go to our website, traveltherapymentor.com. We have a comments or a message us or contact us section. You can either send us a message, which will come over to our email and we'll message you back, or you can fill out a form to set up a phone consult if you'd rather set up a phone consultation, if you're more of a phone person and you want to chat with us. Sometimes it's easier just to get it done that way. So if you want to go to our website, traveltherapymentor.com, and fill out either the message section or the phone call section and get in touch with us, we'd be happy to talk to you about your pay package.
Yep. And then she said, is the 40-hour guarantee clinic or facility specific or travel company related?
It's usually facility based.
And it can be a little of both.
It can be a little bit of both. So some companies are more willing to take the hit. Like I have one company who is kind of like, it just depends. He says mostly it depends on the facility. It's usually whatever the hospital or the SNF or the outpatient is willing to do. But he said that on a case-by-case basis, if a hurricane comes through or, a big snowstorm and the facility is closed for a day and it's going to make a really big difference, then sometimes the company is willing to eat that cost and pay you for that day if it really is important to you or it really is extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
But I'd say for the most part, it's probably facility specific.
That's true.
But you do need to ask. It's just a question you have to ask the company.
Yep.
Okay. Jill wants to know, what does VMS stand for? It stands for Vendor Management System. So it's just a big list. We mentioned earlier, it's a big list of jobs that's offered to all travel companies out there. So if it's on a VMS, if it's on a vendor management system, then all the companies are going to have access to it, which is why you see a lot of overlap in some of the jobs that certain companies have. Whereas, if they are getting jobs outside of that VMS, that's good because that's going to give you that variety when you're working with different companies.
And if a job comes through a VMS, you have to remember that a percentage of the pay package goes to that VMS.
They have to pay a fee on it. So the company has to pay a fee to the VMS system to get access to that job, which could just take a little bit off your pay versus if they had a direct client relationship. The client may or may not charge them a fee or, not above and beyond the normal fee to get that job. So it's just something to consider, but it's not a big deal. I mean, a lot of jobs come from VMSs and they're still jobs.
Yeah, almost all jobs.
They're still great. Majority. It's just something to think about between different companies. Connor says he's a 2021 DPT graduate. So awesome. A couple more years still. Okay, so we're going to shift gears.
Recruiters.
Yeah, so let's talk about some things that you might ask a recruiter or just feel out with a recruiter to find out if they're the right recruiter for you.
So, starting out, you probably want to have a phone conversation with them. I hate talking on the phone. Whitney does most of the phone calls. I don't know why.
I clearly hate to talk.
I just have this aversion to talking on the phone. So anyway, but when you're trying to get to know someone, it's really hard to get to know someone over email or text message or whatever. So phone call is definitely good. And you can hear in their voice how excited they are for you or how much time they have. Are they distracted by other things going on? You can feel those things out a little bit when
Right.
you're talking on the phone.
So a huge thing about finding a recruiter is maybe we recommend a recruiter to you, or your friend recommends a recruiter to you, or you read on Glassdoor that this recruiter is great, but you get on the phone with them and you just don't mesh with them, you don't like them, you don't vibe well. That's important because you're going to be communicating with this person quite a bit, and they're trying to help you find a job that's part of your career. So you need to get along well with them. You guys need to have a good relationship. So that's the first thing, is just feeling out whether you like this person and whether you get along. The other huge thing is responsiveness. So are they going to get back to you? Are they taking a week to respond to your email, or are they responding right away?
That's honestly the biggest thing for us. When you're in a job search, and minutes can make a difference.
Yeah.
So, for example, I had an interview. A job popped up in Yuma, Arizona. We were looking for jobs in Arizona in January. I think it was January or February. But a job popped up at like 4 p.m. Our recruiter sent me a message right away, said the job was open. I interviewed for that job like 10 minutes later, and got the job offer.
That was the quickest turnaround ever. Yeah. He presented the job to Jared. Jared said, "Yep, go ahead and submit my resume over. I would be interested in that job." Within the hour, he said, "Hey, I know this is like short notice, but the manager wants to call you." Called him, had the job offer like within the hour.
So if the recruiter's not on top of that, I'm sure there's a ton of other recruiters that sent that same job to other people, maybe at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, not knowing that the job had already been offered to someone else.
Yeah. So it's something, responsiveness is important. They do have lives, of course. They might be in a meeting. They might be off for the day. They might be on the phone with somebody else. But just in general, starting to feel out. This is why it's important to contact these recruiters in advance of when you're looking for a job. If you're a current traveler, or, you're ready to get started with travel now, it's okay if you're okay, I need a job in a month. But in general, if you're a new grad or you're looking into this for the future, 6 months ahead, we recommend getting in touch a few months in advance, getting to know that recruiter and finding out, okay, are they keeping their appointments with me? If we set up a time to talk, are they following through? Are they emailing me back fairly quickly within the day, by the next day? Are they letting me maybe text them if it's an emergency, or call them on their cell phone if it's an emergency? How well are they communicating with me, so you can know if that's somebody you want to work with?
You do need to be a little bit lenient though, because you have to remember the recruiter has a lot of other people sometimes, and they have their own personal life and all that. So you can't expect them to be answering right away all the time. You should be a little lenient with that, but you in general want someone that is pretty quick to respond to you, and if they don't, like, oh, sorry about that, I had this going on, or whatever, that kind of thing.
And I usually ask them, what happens if I needed to contact you on a weekend? Most of the time you won't, but what happens if something happens on a Friday and you have an emergency and you need to talk to them on a weekend? Like, will they answer, or do they check their email once a weekend? That sort of thing. Just get a feel for that with them, and then are they willing to talk to you after business hours? Because a lot of times you're working during business hours, so they need to maybe have a little bit of flexible hours, or maybe you're on a different time zone. Maybe they're on the East Coast and you're on the West Coast. So just talking to them about whether they're open to having conversations outside of business hours, and most of them are, but you just want to get a feel for that. Okay. The next one I have on my list of things to look out for is whether or not this recruiter seems trustworthy and pretty open with you, or whether they seem shady. So this is not something you can ask them, are you shady? It's just something you have to feel out. So in our list of things that I talked about earlier, and you're asking them to be transparent with you about pay packages and job availability and this and that, if they're just sort of like withholding information and not wanting to share things with you, if they're just sounding like their responses are a little off, or if they're acting like they have an attitude, oh, you shouldn't be working with another company, if they're acting more just shady, then you just have to feel that out.
Yeah, a lot of times you see this, the initial pay offer you get is really low. So some new grads especially will get these really low pay offers, and they might come to us and be like, does this look okay to you? And I'll say, no, that looks terrible. And they go back to the recruiter, and all of a sudden now they can get paid $200 more.
5 minutes later.
Yeah, and that is a huge red flag. So
yeah.
I would never recommend working with someone that all of a sudden when you say, oh, that doesn't look that good, then all of a sudden they can pay you more, because that means they were trying to hold out money in the first place.
I mean, sometimes it does happen. Sometimes
a small amount is different. If it's a big jump, like, so say I've had people come to me that had a pay package for like $12.80 a week after taxes, which is insanely low. And then I say, no, I would never take that job. You should probably work with a different recruiter. Well, they go back to the recruiter and they say, I talked to someone that is an experienced traveler. They said it's really low. Can you pay me any more? Well, then all of a sudden they were like, oh, well, actually, I think we can pay you $15.50 for this. That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
They were obviously trying to keep some of that money.
Yeah. Whereas sometimes I've gone back and said, no, we need more than that. And maybe they're able to throw in something like, well, what if we throw in a $500 travel reimbursement? And like, okay, you know, 500 extra bucks for the entire 13-week contract is not a huge jump. Or what if it's, I need to go talk with my manager. I can find out if we could maybe try to adjust it a little bit. And then they talk to their manager and they come back and they say, okay, you know, maybe we can do this and this. And it's a small adjustment. But if it's just suddenly 5 minutes, like, boom, here's extra money, that means they were holding back the first time, and that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next is experience level of the recruiter. So we usually prefer to work with recruiters that have a decent amount of experience because they know how the whole game works. They know how they know the ins and outs of travel, basically. Right. Whereas there's plenty of really hungry new recruiters that are great and they're really responsive and everything, but there's situations where they haven't encountered yet and they don't know exactly how to handle it. So we would rather have someone that's experienced, they've been in the game for a long time, we know they're probably not going anywhere. Whereas if you're working with a recruiter that's only been working for maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months in, they decide it's not right for them and then you have to find a new recruiter. So we usually prefer to work with people with more experience if possible.
But it's not always a deal breaker. It's just something else to take into account. So if you like everything else about the recruiter and they say they've only been with the company 6 months, everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's not the end of the world, but you just have to know, okay, if they don't know the answer, are they willing to ask? You know, do they have a direct supervisor or direct contact within the company? Oh, I don't know the answer to that, but I will talk with my manager who's been with the company for 5 years and I will get back to you. Are they willing to admit that they don't know? That's important. You know, they're not just flying by the seat of their pants. So even if they are new, it's not the end of the world. Which brings us to another one I want to talk about is just get a feel for what their work environment is like. Do they work on a team? Do they have a direct contact a manager that's there? Say they take a day off. They take a day off because they're sick or they have vacation or their kids or whatever, and they're not there. Who's covering their desk that day? You want to know who their manager is so you're not just suddenly stuck not knowing who to contact if they're out that day. Especially if you're looking for jobs, like if you're in an active job search and you're used to getting updates on a day-to-day basis and they're like, oh, actually, by the way, I'm not going to be here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. You need to know who you're going to be talking to on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Similarly, if you're on contract and an emergency arises and you need help, you need to know who to contact if they're not there.
Yep.
So get a feel for that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about as far as recruiters is finding out how many travelers that recruiter works with at any given time.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple reasons why you'd want to know that, but the biggest is probably if they're working with a ton of other travelers, that might be a good sign that they're a pretty good recruiter, but they also might not have as much time for you. And depending on how experienced you are as a traveler, you might want someone that has more time to spend with you, more time to talk to you, answer your questions. Whereas like us, we don't really care that much if the person doesn't have that much time after we get the job. So we want someone that is on top of things until we get the job. Once we have the job, we rarely ever have problems with our jobs. We don't have any reason to check in with the recruiter. There's times when I've not talked to the recruiter I'm on assignment with for the entire 3 months. So that's not a big deal for us, but for other people it might be.
Yeah, so getting a feel for example, I would say this is not a hard fast rule, but of all the ones I've talked to, the ones that tend to have 30 or less travelers on their plate are usually the ones that are going to be more responsive, and that might mean that they have 30 that they're working with or talking to actively, but maybe only 10 of those are on contract right now. That's a pretty good number. I've worked with some that are even lower than that only work between 10 and 20 therapists, and that's a really good number because that means they're going to have plenty of time to be focused on you. Now, if they have 50 or more, maybe it means they're not going to have as much time to care about you. But again, it all depends on what you're looking for.
And it also depends on how much time they spend at work. We know some recruiters that are pretty much never off work. They're just always working. So obviously they can handle more travelers. But we know some other ones that have they go there at 9 and they leave at 5 and that's it.
They check out.
So
yes, it's just something to take into account. And then it also depends on what your experience level is. If you feel like you're a new grad and you're just going to need to have a lot more support and a lot more help, maybe those recruiters that are able to provide that to you are more important. Whereas if you are a current traveler or you've been a therapist for a while and you just need support on just getting the job or just finding a certain contract, but you don't have a lot of questions, you don't need a lot of support, maybe that's not as important to you, but it's just something to take into account. Yep. Which brings up another thing I forgot to mention earlier that you might want to look for in certain companies, which we talked about in a previous video, was mentorship. So if you are a newer grad and you are looking at certain companies and you're comparing company A to company B, asking if they have any type of mentorship program and what that looks like. So it might be something that's like structured, like an actual mentorship program where they set you up with a mentor that you have to contact by phone, or it might just be that your recruiter says, yeah, I work with new grads all the time, and I just placed another new grad in a new grad friendly facility. I'm gonna look for a new grad friendly facility for you. So just getting a feel for whether they are gonna provide that support and that mentorship that you're looking for that might be important to you, but isn't important to somebody else.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's answer some questions.
Yep.
Lauren said, how far in advance of wanting to search for jobs do you think new grads should reach out to recruiters? So we started, just as an example, about 6 months before. I would say that was probably a little bit too long. I would recommend somewhere like around 4 months probably to start filling out paperwork, building a relationship with a recruiter, figuring out which company and recruiter you want to work with, all that stuff. So yeah, 4 months or so is pretty good. You normally don't find jobs until about probably a month before you want to start. So, that gives you 3 months or so to, get the hang of what it's going to be like, how they're going to present you jobs, what they have available now, all those things.
Yeah, and if you're not a new grad and you're an experienced therapist, or say today is March 31st and you're like, oh gosh, I graduate in May, it's not too late. Because like you said, it's, you're not really going to start to see the jobs until 4 to 6 weeks out. But I would try to at least contact recruiters 8 to 12 weeks, 2 to 3 months in advance. If possible, to build that relationship before it's actually crunch time and you're like, oh, I need a job in 4 weeks, like now.
And getting the paperwork filled out, because they might say, oh, here's a job, but you don't have any paperwork filled out. And so you're in a rush. Yeah, they can't submit you. So you're in a rush to try to fill everything out so they can submit you for a job.
And then you might miss the job because you really do need to go ahead and just have at least a profile built out with them, which might include your resume and a few things about you, so that when it's time and they see the job, your dream job, come across the board, they can say, hey, can I submit you for this now? And you say yes, because otherwise you're going to miss that job because somebody else is going to get it that it was already on the ball.
Yep. Connor said, if you don't like a specific recruiter within an agency, but the benefits and the perks of that agency are exactly what you want, is it possible to simply switch recruiters? Yes. So normally the way to go about that can be a really awkward situation. We've had that situation before. I would say is usually to call the company directly, talk to a supervisor or manager, explain the situation. They understand, like sometimes two personalities don't get along. They might be a great recruiter for 40 other people, but for you just don't mesh well, and that happens. So talk to the manager, say, I don't really get along that well with them, or explain what's going on and I would like to switch. Do you have anyone else that I could work with at the company? I don't want to leave this company, and they'll be willing to work with you. I mean, they want to keep you as a traveler.
It typically has to go through a management level though, because we tried going directly through like a recruiter to recruiter and it did not work out that way. They were like, well, I need to talk to my manager, and then they'll have to talk to that other person's manager to make sure everything's okay. So sometimes it's a little bit complicated, so you just want to make sure to go the right way about it. I would just try to find out who the manager is and talk from there, but it is possible.
Thanks for joining in, Ash.
Yep, hi Ash. And then Lauren says recruiters and company information. So Lauren, I'll chat with you after this. I will send you a message. So that's most of what we wanted to talk about tonight about recruiters and companies. If you guys have questions, go ahead and just leave them below. We'll answer a few more questions. If you guys want to know which companies and recruiters we recommend, please just comment #company below, and we will send you a message after this to find out what it is that you're looking for in a company, so we can help provide you the best information possible.
Yeah, so Jennifer said, my company that I work PRN with, they also are travel companies, keep switching recruiters every 6 months. It's frustrating. Yeah, that is frustrating. So probably the way I would handle that is I would get a recommendation from another traveler that might work with that company that enjoys their recruiter. Contact a manager, say, I want to switch to this recruiter specifically because you already know that someone else has had a good experience with them.
And hopefully they've been there for a long time.
Yeah, hopefully they're not going to leave.
Jennifer, can you explain further? Is it because the recruiters are leaving, or is it some kind of company rule? Why are they switching recruiters on you all the time?
Yeah.
I see that a couple people have liked the video. If you guys don't mind, just hit the like button, share this video, or tag friends below so more people can join in the conversation and see this video on the replay.
Yeah. Our chili's ready. The more engagement we get, the more people see the video. So yeah, likes, comments, shares are awesome.
Yeah, we would really appreciate it if you guys could do that for us. Hi, Ash. Ash says it's been a busy day and I'm going to rewatch the whole video tomorrow. Thank you for your support, Ash. We appreciate that. And you're very welcome for this video. Thank you for tuning in every week with us.
Yep.
Jennifer said no, it's not because they're leaving, or no, it's not because it's a company policy. Can you clarify? Oh, they moved the recruiter to another area.
So that might be specific for PRN then. Maybe not for travelers. I'm not really sure because I've never heard of that happening.
Yeah,
because most travel recruiters will work with, you know, the entire country. So there's not regions, but we have heard that there's some, or I guess companies that have certain recruiters that just work in one region or another. So maybe it's some situation like that.
I haven't heard of that specific thing, but Jennifer, my best recommendation would be to talk with the management and find out what's the reason for this, and can I just please stay with the same recruiter, or just look for a different company. If you're interested in knowing which ones we like, you can send me a message after this and talk about which company you're talking about and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would talk to the manager and let them know that you don't want to have to switch and tell them all that, and I'm sure they can figure it out.
Yeah. Okay.
So in conclusion, there's no one best company, there's no one best recruiter. So when we get that question, we're always going to say it depends on your preferences, it depends on your personality, it depends on what you want out of travel. You just want the best assignment locations, you want the highest paid, you want the best benefits. There's so many different variables that go into that. So, and that's why when we have these people asking for recruiter recommendations, that we want to get more information to be able to give the best recommendations that we can.
Yeah, the best recommendations for you, because it's all dependent on you and your very personal situation. So there's just a lot of things to think about. After this, like I said, I will insert the link to that article where I kind of listed in a bullet point of all these things that we look for in recruiters and companies. And again, if you guys want to send us a message after this, we'd be happy to talk to you about some of those factors and which companies we like and why. But we recommend in general that you work with 2 to 3 companies so that you have the most options possible. Yeah, so let's go through. We have just a couple more questions coming through and then we'll wrap up here.
Ash says, if the facility is new grad friendly, does it usually mean a gradual ramp up time or supervision for a couple weeks? Yeah, usually that's what it means. Usually it means there'll be another PT in the clinic, maybe someone that has had a lot of students in the past. That's a good a good educator, a good clinician, experienced clinician, and it usually means some sort of ramp up period where you're not just being thrown right in.
Yeah, there's no standard new grad friendly, but like I have a recruiter who says, you know, I know of, she's been working for a long time with this company, and she's like, I know there's certain ones that I have placed new grads in before successfully, and so I usually try to sway my new grads to, you know, I have this job that I've seen new grads be very successful in before. The manager's great. They have another PT or another OT or another speech therapist there. You know, they support you, and then it also very much depends on the interview. So you want to find out in the interview what they're going to do to support you as a new grad, and you don't want to sound like you're not confident, but just that there might be a longer ramp up time, or there might be a little bit of assistance, and who's going to be your contact person on site if you need help. Yeah,
and part 2 of that question, yeah, usually there's going to be some sort of mentor in the facility, like a mentor as an experienced clinician.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would necessarily ever ask in a job interview if there's going to be a mentor there. I probably wouldn't use that word, because a lot of times if somebody else is interviewing for this job and if you were to say that to the interviewer, to the manager, they might say, oh gosh, this doesn't sound like, this is like a student who might not really know what they're doing. You don't want to sound like you're not confident. You just want to know, oh, is there another PT on staff or another OT on staff that I could talk to if I have questions? You know, what's my caseload going to be like the first couple weeks to kind of get ramped up and get adjusted, that sort of thing. And that's something you can try to find out from your recruiter as much as possible before going into the interview, but then also you want to ask during the interview. Okay, hi Bailey, thank you for tuning in. Bailey is a DPT student that's graduating in August of 2020. I'm interested in doing travel therapy between graduation and beginning an orthopedic residency. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I would love recommendations on recruiters and companies, and thank you for doing this video. Wonderful.
So anybody watching this video on the replay, #team replay, if you need a recruiter or travel company recommendations, #company, and we can send you those recommendations. But thanks for watching. I think this ended up being our longest video ever. I thought this was going to be a short one. This always happens.
So many things to talk about. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. And if you got value out of this video, like I said, just like it, share it, tag a friend, and tune in with us next week, and we will announce our next topic.
Next Sunday again at 8 p.m. I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but if you guys have any recommendations, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
See you later.
Bye.